You've heard it, right? Maybe you've even thought it yourself. That nagging feeling that the younger generation, well, that they're just not up to snuff. They're lazy or disrespectful or just different. It feels like a totally modern problem, something unique to our time. But what if I told you this isn't new at all? What if it's actually the oldest complaint in the book?
Yeah, you're seeing that right. That's not a tweet from last week. That's Aristotle from ancient Greece. We're talking more than 2,000 years ago. So it turns out complaining about kids these days isn't some newfangled trend. It's a straight-up ancient tradition.
And it just never stops. I mean, look at this. Fast forward to the 1600s, and young people were saucy. By the 1800s, they were untutored savages. Ouch. Then in the 1920s, rude and utterly selfish. And hey, even in the 90s, they just lived too well and complained too much. You starting to see a pattern here? It seems like every generation hits a certain age, looks at the next one, and sees the world going downhill. Okay, but in all fairness, while the complaint is ancient, the world itself is always changing. So maybe the feeling is timeless, but the context, that's brand new. So why does it feel so especially intense right now?
Well, what we're talking about here is what sociologists call the generation gap. It's just a simple term for that friction we all feel, those differences in beliefs, in politics, even in how we talk, that separate one age group from another.
Let's make this real with an example. Think about a simple phrase like good communication skills. For an older worker, that might bring to mind formal writing, maybe public speaking. But for a younger person, it's probably all about being quick and clear on email, Slack, or instant messenger. See? Neither one is wrong, but the very definition of the skill has totally shifted.
And this gets to a really critical point, something that's at the heart of the research by Dr. Ronnie A. Rodas. His work digs into exactly this, how our constant interaction with technology actually shapes these generational perceptions. He argues that technology doesn't just give us new toys to play with, it fundamentally changes the yardstick we use to measure what it means to be competent. This can lead older generations to feel like their skills were sharper because they didn't rely on digital tools, making these generational gaps feel wider and deeper than ever.
So, okay, we've got a timeless complaint, but it's being supercharged by modern tech. It feels incredibly real. But what if it's not? What if this decline we think we see in the youth has less to do with them and more to do with a little trick our own minds are playing on us?
Turns out there's a name for this. Researchers John Protzko and Jonathan Schooler actually call it the kids these days effect. And they've dug deep into why this feeling is so powerful and why it pops up again and again in every single era. So what is actually happening here? Seriously, if every generation has been in decline for the last 2,500 years, shouldn't we be living in caves by now? Obviously we're not. So the answer isn't that society is collapsing. It's actually found in psychology.
And this is where the research gets really fascinating. The conclusion is that this kids these days effect, it isn't caused by any real failure in young people. Nope, the cause is a predictable, totally universal quirk in how our own adult brains work. They call it the decline illusion. Now, our brains aren't trying to trick us, but they do use a couple of mental shortcuts that, when they combine, create this incredibly powerful and convincing story, a story of generational decay that just isn't true.
Okay, so here's the secret recipe. There are two main cognitive biases doing all the work. First, you've got the expert bias, which means we tend to notice flaws in others in the exact areas where we happen to be really good. And second, there's the memory bias. Basically, we have terrible memories of our younger selves, and we tend to project the person we are today back in time. Let's break those down.
The expert bias is pretty wild when you see it in action. The research found that the more a person values authority, the more they're convinced kids today are disrespectful. The more you love to read, the more certain you are that kids these days just don't read anymore. And get this, the more intelligent someone is, the more they believe that intelligence is declining in the youth. See the pattern? We're all using our own personal strengths as the ultimate measuring stick, and surprise, surprise, others come up short.
And then you add the memory bias on top of that. Think about it. You don't remember yourself as a clueless, awkward teenager. You remember your youth through the filter of the smart, capable adult you are right now. This creates this idealized, flawless version of how your generation was back in the day. And of course, today's actual teenagers can never, ever measure up to that completely fabricated standard.
So you put these two biases together, and you get this, our subjective reality. This is the perception cycle.
We look back at the generation before us, then at ourselves, and then, as we get older, we look at the new kids on the block and see this steep, terrifying decline. It makes us feel superior, and we just assume this cycle repeats forever. This is the illusion. But now let's look at what's really happening. When you stop looking at feelings and start looking at objective data, things like IQ scores, morality, quality of life, the story completely flips. There is no decline. In fact, there is a slow but steady progress generation after generation. I mean, there's something called the Flynn effect that shows IQ scores have been consistently going up for decades. So here's the punchline. Our powerful feeling of decline is directly contradicted by the actual evidence of progress.
So what does that leave us? Well, once you understand the decline illusion, you can start to move past all those tired, old generation gap arguments. The whole conversation shifts from what's wrong with them to the much more interesting question of what's going on with us.
If you take one thing away from this, let it be this. The good old days were never as good as you remember. That whole idea is mostly a fiction, cooked up by these predictable tricks of the mind. So the next time you feel that little pang of disappointment about the youth of today, just remember, that feeling says a lot more about your own memory and expertise than it does about the actual state of the world. The data is clear. We're building on the past, not ruining it.
So I want to leave you with one last thought. This generation gap, this complaint, it's been with us for thousands of years. What if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if its real purpose isn't to divide us at all? What if it's a built-in feature of the human mind, a constant, repeating reminder of the strange, fascinating, and flawed way our own brains work?